Alrighty. Whoa. And we already moved forward ahead. We don't need that yet. So welcome. I'm Carolyn Ellis. I'm with Arizona State University, and today we'll be hosting Fraser and Dieter with Ask the Assessor, and we'll be doing a version live. So we started this year, and so it's a pretty exciting offering, but we're going to just give it a little recap today as well as hit one live. And then we're also going to hit some RCOP resources, plenty of them. But I assure you, so if you even have participated in all of these webinars and know all about our resources, I assure you, if you stayed at the end, there are still a couple of them that you probably haven't seen. And so really excited to share those. So we'll jump right into the poll question. And yes, it is light. That is what is my December energy best described as? And we'll hit the answers for others on in a few screens, but just trying to keep it upbeat. Here you go. All right. If you haven't been here before, who is RCOP? RCOP is essentially Regulated Research Community of Practice. We are connecting research institutions at the research level for on the innovation and where it meets regulation. But we are a community that brings together all sorts of different roles and areas under the space. So you'll see us in lots of different spaces, but we're somewhat the glue that brings us all together. We have around 380 institutions right now, about 8 countries. I wanted to highlight a couple items that are upcoming. So first of all, Internet 2 has a new secure research environments webinar series and workshop. And this will be getting kicked off January 20th with Mike Korn on the changing risk landscape for research security, but we'll also hear from a lot of our other friends. And this whole series will go essentially through summer, but it's been built in partnership with us as well as CARC. There's a lot of expertise that we have to be sharing in this space, and so hope you can join, attend, or even participate in ways that they're looking for maybe speakers or such. The other big one that's coming up is EDUCAUSE has a learning lab coming up, and so that's building CMMC readiness in higher ed, and that one will be a 4-part series, all taking part through February. Here's the links are all in the Google Doc that will be circulating, and we have a reference sheet for today. So anytime there's not links on the page, they're all in the document. A heavily built document this time. I also wanted to promote the fact that EDUCAUSE Cybersecurity Privacy Professionals Conference is coming up. It's definitely one of my favorite conferences all year. It's where we really get together and have that intersection between the cybersecurity elements as well as they fully embrace that research is the new greatest thing, at least, well, one of them. And I feel really welcomed at this conference. So I just crossed this out this morning because the call for proposals, it's already open and it will go through mid-January. So January 12th is when it closes. Get your ideas and concepts in. It'll be great to have a really good platform for it. And they're also doing office hours, which is a really cool thing where they're going to offer feedback to you and ways to make sure what you want to be talking about or need the community to be hearing about, they can help make it better. With that, I will just also highlight that 2 of the upcoming webinars. So our January one will be AI use cases within your peers. So for example, what are Arizona State, Notre Dame, and Michigan doing with some of their AI components for their research compliance and their cybersecurity elements. then the second part of that one's also going to be, hey, what type of cybersecurity considerations should we be all thinking about when it comes to AI? So looking forward to that one. And then the next one for February, we have UCSD returning with they have done a lot of things since the last time we heard from their CMMC journey. And so this will be the follow-on talk to, hey, we did a learning assessment. This was amazing. This was incredible. And now we have to pursue the actual certification. All right, poll results. Since this is still anonymized, this will be fun. Again, I'm not sharing this online. This is just for December energy. This is how we're feeling. So for the recording at home, the question was, let's keep it light, won't be posted online. My December energy is best described as festive but firewalled. And we have 14% of us feeling that. Running the end of the year scripts, 17%. Short on elves these days, 26%. That's me. Holding on with MFA and caffeine, 22%. And in a soft change freeze, 7%. Already mentally in January, logged out in every way but literally, and 13% of us are feeling that. So yes, happy December, and as I've been saying to a few people, it's been a year. With that, I will hand the floor over to Eric and Andrew to get us going for Ask the Assessor.
All right. Well, I'm Eric Dermis. I'm with the University of Florida. Andrew, why don't you introduce yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon. My name is Andrew Hicks. I'm a partner at Frazier and Dieter, and I lead our cyber advisory practice.
All right. So what we're going to do next is describe a new program or activity that was suggested by Frazier and Dieter that now the regulated research community of practice has been doing for this year. We started in February. And what it is Frazier and Dieter are real licensed card carrying auditors and assessors.
We're armed and dangerous.
Our community has these questions that sometimes are only properly answered with the proper, I's dotted and T's crossed. And so we have this monthly cadence of asking a question that the community feels is relevant, that we want to know. And then we formulate that question. We will quickly go over them next. And then Frazier and Dieter, with its team of experts, looks at it and formulates an answer that is then shared with the community. All these questions that we've done this year are available on our website. And today we will also ask a new question. But in order to set the tone, we're going to very quickly go over the questions we had earlier this year. So the way this works is there's a work group, which is the Ask the Assessor team of regulated research community of practice members. And they have been meeting regularly to gather information from the community and then formulate the question and look at the answer and then post and disseminate the answer. So here you see the list of the team, and so we thank all of them for their volunteer efforts.
I will also add that in addition to volunteering on our side, this work is in kind from Frazier and Dieter as well.
Yes. And here are the people that we work with. And so we really want to thank them. We really want to thank them for doing this, because it's a very creative suggestion and it has been very useful to just clarify things. And one of the reasons why this is so valuable is that it's not just the opinion of us in academic institutions who have learned some things and may have the correct sort of assessment, But when we have to go and tell our administrators, our leadership, our vice president for research or legal counsel, we can say, hey, this is not just something we, like Eric at the University of Florida, invented. There are some real professionals that looked at this, and this is their considered opinion. And that is just very valuable to have these conversations. So thank you.
Yeah, and Eric, if I can,
Yeah.
so as we go through the agenda today, everybody here has a speaking part. I've been on this call. This is my second year now. And Eric, if you remember, you and I presented this very month 2 years ago on the high trust journey. Today we're going to switch it up a little bit. But I brought with me some well-esteemed colleagues. Jesse and Scott both work in our advisory practice as well. They're both PCI experts, CMMC experts. And then Bob, who we're going to transition the next slide to. A lot of what we're talking about here initiated from Bob's brain, his idea in terms of how do we collaborate more with RCOP and really take what your guys' initiative, which I love. I've been attending for months, every month for the last couple of years, but take some of the things that we hear and really kind of build some more commentary around that. So we're giving back to the community in terms of some of these compliance initiatives and challenges and things like that. So this next slide, Bob, if you want to take and talk a little bit more about the backdrop, and then we'll get into some of those questions.
Yeah, thank you, Andrew, and thank you, Carolyn and Eric, and appreciate being here. I just want to take a minute about why we decided RCOP and FD, that how we came together, and also to give a little bit of updated news, a new program it's an evolution of Ask the Assessor program I want to talk about. But in general, I think the reason we decided to collaborate is because our missions align so naturally. We saw that RCOP exists to help research universities strengthen compliance, reduce risk, collaborate around emerging regulatory regulations. And we believe that we had the same commitment as we were working with universities and saw some of the challenges you were working with, budget constraints, restricted data sets, the difficulty balancing needs for security and collaboration. So every day we work with institutions like you to navigate frameworks like CMMC, HIPAA, High Trust SOC, PCI standards that are increasingly shape how you protect research data, manage third-party risk, and maintain sponsor trust. So to us, the Ask the Assessor program was a perfect example of how we aligned and bringing expert guidance directly to you, helping your teams interpret requirements, validate readiness, and build stronger, more resilient compliance programs. So to us, it's been a perfect situation. A little bit about what we've decided to go forward with, and that's to take this figuratively on the road. Many of you have come to us and say, look, can we bring our constituencies together? We have different parts of our university that have different concerns. And so we came up with the idea of a roadshow workshop that we would start with virtually with an agenda. There's a sample agenda here on the right, defining the scope and really trying to help you develop a data security compliance roadmap that you can help galvanize the various stakeholders in your university. So we're super excited about that. We'd love for you to contact. We can do it virtually, or there have been some universities have asked us to come on site, which has been very helpful, and we're definitely willing to do that. So please, my contact information is somewhere in all this material and on the Ask the Assessor website. Please feel free to contact me. But I'll just end by saying we're just very excited and gratified to have this great relationship with RCOP, and thank you.
All right, so now Andrew and I will quickly go over these questions. So the first question from February was managing multiple data types in a single enclave. Can a single enclave infrastructure securely handle multiple data classification types? For example, HIPAA, ITAR, DFARS, FERPA, provided the required security controls like NIST 800-171 are followed.
So Eric, I'll go ahead and take some of these responses. So for this one, we we saw that a common challenge for universities is that different research projects come with different regulatory obligations. So that's kind of what stemmed what I think this question came from. So short answer is yes. So a single enclave can support multiple data classifications, but typically only if it's designed to meet the strictest requirements of those regulatory obligations, like in your ecosystem landscape, that you're subject to. So instead of running 5 separate enclaves, you build one environment to the highest bar, and then make sure every control is mapped to the applicable regulation. So essentially, the approach that we typically recommend is to build that consolidated control set that will combine all the different frameworks and requirements based off of the obligations that you have. And then wherever there's a conflict, follow the most restrictive standard. So if one framework is passwords are at 8 characters, whereas one is at 12, follow the 12. If there's a way for you to segment within your enclave, highly recommend that, so that different data sets still have strong separation, whether it's via network access controls. Obviously, we will always promote least privilege tied to each of those classifications. And then the last point, at least from the approach standpoint, is still enforce encryption, still enforce logging, all of those best practice security measures within your enclave itself. So biggest takeaway is you don't need multiple enclaves, but you do need serious architecture and governance to oversee how it's implemented.
Great. So then the second question was from March, navigating policy hierarchies in support of compliance. So academic institutions are subject to existing state, local, or institutional policies, procedures, and standards to support their operations, including any CUI environments. Is it acceptable to refer to these and inherit them when a control is satisfied by a higher level policy?
Yeah.
Jesse, I can take that one, Jesse.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah. So basically the thing here, and we see a lot of times where a standard, a framework, or regulation will kind of dictate the shape and the formatting of policies and procedures, and that's never a good idea. I mean, policies and procedures by themselves have a very specific mission. And when you look across a campus, a university, et cetera, with lots of different regulations and hierarchies and things like that, the biggest thing is just to make sure that you don't have language that combats policies in other areas or procedures in other areas. So you want to make sure they're well ironed out. So if you were to, lay them out, so to speak, in a single pane of glass, there's nothing that's conflicting. They all kind of work together. They reference things, right? So instead of having, your minimum password length requirement written 10 times across different policies, have it in one spot, but all the other policies and procedures reference that. The only exception to that would be where you've got something very specific. Obviously, there's things very unique to CUI, and those can be more or less an addendum to an existing policy or procedure, where anything that does not comply with that becomes an exception that's listed out in that specific documentation.
All right, very good. The next one is from June, security protection assets. How are security protection assets assessed when they are shared services serving a CUI enclave as well as other departments' users on campus?
Yep, so I can take that one. So a lot of universities are using some type of centralized IT service, whether it be Active Directory, firewalls, logging tools. The list goes on and on because it typically is cost effective. It's easier to manage that way. But when you introduce a CUI enclave or an enclave that's meant for specific purposes, those same shared services now become what assessors are going to call security protection assets. They're going to impact the security of the enclave itself. So they're now evaluated as probably a part of your assessment and therefore need to be documented and secured in the proper manner. So to do this right, institutions should define your boundaries clearly. So whether you're using documentation diagrams, so what's inside the enclave, how the data flows, where shared services sit. inventory each of those shared services. So what is its function? Like the security configurations, hardening, how is access controlled? And then obviously going back to logging, that also needs to be specific to whatever the enclave regulations need to be, even though they support maybe your generic or other sides of the university. But at the end of the day, they are part of your compliance perimeter. So they are going to be asked upon if you are getting maybe a CMMC assessment. So they don't necessarily prevent compliance, but transparent scoping and documentation is going to be really key for where they sit, what they do, and how they interact with each environment. So the biggest takeaway is they're allowed, but they're in scope. So defining those boundaries, documenting the controls are going to be critical for any assessments that you may go through.
Great, thank you. So the next one is August, navigating software security in research. Many researchers develop and use various software and repositories as part of their research. How do assessors look at the overall software usage and development requirements?
I can take that one, Eric. So for this one, our response was that assessors look at how the software is used, who can access it, what data it touches, and what controls are in place to prevent unauthorized changes. Even static research tools still need some level of maintenance and review. If you open these Ask the Assessor, I'll call them issues, there's additional questions within that. So beyond this initial high-level question, there was also questions about allow listing researcher developed code. So in that, we explained you don't always need to approve every single compilation. Many environments can approve a directory or set of executables as long as the risk profile, stays the same. Another topic was whether researchers must follow a secure development process. The answer is absolutely yes. Any code development should follow a defined, secure lifecycle, and that helps reduce vulnerabilities and protect institutional systems. Within that, we also covered the use of older software or libraries for reproducibility. That can be acceptable, but only in controlled or isolated environments with proper compensating controls. Lastly, we talked about large repositories, open source, commercial, internal. Approving an entire repository can be appropriate when that repo is trusted and used in a well-controlled environment, but there still needs to be a formal review process behind it. So I'd say overall, the takeaway is that assessors are looking for structured, risk-based processes that balance research flexibility with sound security practices.
Thank you.
We do have a
Okay,
follow-up on that one.
Okay.
I'll jump in with that. So if a campus AD does not host, transmit, or process CUI, does that mean all of the campus is in scope? I thought it just means authentication related controls fall within scope.
Yeah, so that's a good question. It does not mean all of campus is in scope. What they'll do for like specific security devices is they're going to apply the requirements or controls that are actually related to what that device does. So that AD is really going to be looked at from an authentication standpoint. It's not going to take in your maybe like other university or generic users. So it's really based off of function.
Great. Okay, so the next one is the October question, managing lab and specialized equipment. What is considered best practice for scenarios with lab equipment or specialized equipment where the equipment cannot be configured to meet CMMC requirements? What kind of documentation is expected for these assets beyond mention in the system security plan?
Yeah, so labs typically rely on equipment that just simply can't support modern security controls. So there comes the question, like what happens when that equipment is then used for research involving CUI, PII thing, or any other regulated data. So assessors will expect you to classify these devices as specialized assets. So the goal is not to like force compliance onto them, but rather it takes a risk-based approach and uses compensating controls around that asset to provide protection where it can. So really what that means is that equipment is included in your inventories, your diagrams where applicable. Eric, you mentioned the system security plan. That's definitely needs to be documented within that document as a specialized asset, what its purpose is and what you're doing to protect it wherever you can. Build that risk exception register so you can explain what controls can't be applied based off of what that asset's purpose is and the constraints that you may have. Any way that you can segment it, so placing that device on maybe an isolated network or another VLAN, something to that degree helps reduce the risk as well. As in addition, any like physical or logical access, any ways of avoiding storing like actual CUI directly on the device will also help keep that risk down. And then monitor and train the lab staff that are using them. So it's especially important in like mixed use scenarios where like data boundaries might get a little blurry when there could be CUI from one project, and what we don't want is it accidentally showing up in another project that doesn't need that type of data. So essentially, it's okay if it doesn't meet all of the full technical controls. What matters is the transparent documentation and all of those compensating controls that you are able to put in place to help mitigate that risk.
Yeah, actually, your final comment sort of half answers the question that was posed in chat. How do you, as an assessor, come down on sharing of specialized equipment between regulated CUI and unregulated research?
Yeah, so we've seen a couple different approaches. I think the biggest best practice that I've seen implemented so far is to limit actual storage on the device itself and to transfer any outputs to a compliant storage mechanism as soon as possible to help reduce the risk there. Because what we've seen too is a lot of those devices are mixed use. So it's not just one team leveraging them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, some standard cleaning process of reset
Yeah.
to factory status, some sort of, like a known clean state.
Right. And like an assessor, it will test against your procedures and they'll really rely on your SSP of how you've classified that asset and the things that you are doing to reduce risk where you can. So that pulls up into training the staff appropriately so that those procedures are followed.
Thank you. All right, next slide. So this is the new question for this month that we are going to answer. There will still be a formal answer coming later, but we're going to answer this one live. How does an organization know that it's ready for an assessment? How should an organization prepare for a C3PAO assessment? What should the organization expect during an assessment?
All right, so I'll start with how does an organization know it's ready, and then kind of interweave some of the other questions, Eric, you just mentioned. But first off, readiness starts with correct scoping and a complete asset inventory. It's hard to do readiness when you don't have a solidified understanding of what your environment looks like. You have potential to either have scope creep and maybe overburden the compliance side when you don't need it. And then the scarier part of, or the reverse is now you have holes and you're not properly protecting pieces of your environment that really should be in scope. So ensuring that your environment is fully defined and understood is really critical. And then from there, you need a defensible SSP or system security plan, this is where like this is your blueprint for how you're implementing all of your each of the controls, how your procedures work, all of the assets and tools and stuff that are being used to satisfy those. It's really your guide as to how you are compliant with that particular regulation. The third one would obviously, you're ready when you have all 110 requirements fully implemented. And there's a number of ways to get there, and we'll get to that point in a second. But and then you can use the use of POAMs to limit any of the remediation that still might be ongoing. I would highly recommend to limit those to really low risk items that should be completed by the time that you actually get to your assessment. But ultimately, each control needs to have clear ownership. The next one would be policies and procedures. They need to be buttoned up, complete, approved, and aligned with all of the applicable control families and requirements. You'll need, that kind of piggybacks to the next one, which is evidence, because then you'll need the evidence to then show that you have in fact implemented all of those policies and procedures for each of those controls. So being able to map evidence and your policies and procedures is going to help your efficiency from a assessment standpoint. The next would be readiness review. So this kind of goes with you have all your requirements fully implemented. I can't stress enough, readiness is important. This will help kind of turn over any stones, kind of uncover those gaps that you might not fully be aware of, or like interpretation of how certain requirements might fit in your environment. That is the point of readiness, or doing some type of, the next one, full mock or pre-audit. You just want to make sure that there aren't surprises. The last thing you want to do is go through an assessment and have a surprise, and then you're back to kind of square one at that point. And then the last one I'll mention is just leadership, and SMEs need to be ready. Clear roles and responsibilities. They have the time to respond to the readiness and assessment efforts, as well as the resources to support this, so that you're confident when you make it into that next assessment phase. So if you don't mind going to the next slide.
Hey, Jesse, I'm going to interject real quick.
Sure.
So we're gonna release the whole response set later this month. We've got maybe 3 minutes left. If you can kind of give a quick synopsis of the last two questions.
Yeah. So this is laying out how you should prepare. So again, we've touched on the readiness, implementation, and mock. That's all your pre-work before your certification. When you hit your certification, it's probably going to look and feel a little bit similar. So you'll have planning, kickoff, evidence review, interviews, validation, all of those exercises that you're doing from a readiness. That's essentially what your certification will look like at the end of the day. It's highly structured and transparent. I will say, if an objective is not met, readiness, that gives you the time to fix it. In your certification, if it's not met, that's when you have the ability to use a POAM. However, it cannot be a high risk requirements. Those aren't eligible for POAM. So if they carry a higher weight, you can't use a POAM for them. And then lastly, I'll close with what happens after the C3PAO. So after your certification, your C3PAO will compile the results and submit them to what's called EMAS. Once they're submitted there, they are automatically transmitted to SPRS or SPRS. That kind of becomes the authoritative, like, public reference for your CMMC status, and that's usually happens within a couple days, maybe a week after submission.
Thank you.
Yep. Yep. Those are just some top reasons we've seen companies struggle with a CMMC assessment, just if it's helpful for your own planning purposes.
I will add the two follow-up questions. So, do you have specific opinions on evidence? What should it look like? GRC tools separated by the assessment objective. And so, what does the Goldilocks evidence for our practice look like? That might be getting deeper than we anticipated, but is there a quick answer for something like that?
As far as evidence, it's really going to be dependent on the requirement. It just needs to fully show that that requirement has been implemented. So if it has to do with password policies, we would expect to see maybe an Active Directory GPO that shows the configuration behind it, as well as the policies and procedures that enforces what it's configured at. So it's kind of a twofold of documentation. And then when needed, when it's a little bit more technical, the actual configuration it could be screenshots, it could be scripts, it could be exports, things like that to basically validate what you've put in your PMP matches what you've configured within your environment. But yes, we could probably have a whole session on that.
Thanks. And with that, I'll continue on. But please add to the chat your responses of how you've either seen or used some of these responses. This is some great work that I appreciate this collaboration. And again, it's all in-kind effort. So they're doing this for us. Let me hit the resource roundup a little bit. So this is a really interesting time with RCOP. We began as a fully funded NSF award to create this community, but as of August, actually, we are no longer just an NSF award. We are no longer tied to a single institution. We are kind of figuring out what's coming next for us, and so we have turned into a fairly sustainable community at the moment. We do have supplemental funding with the Trusted CI Award, but we also have a whole lot of all of us joining in for the leadership efforts to continue this community. So we're what's defining what's next, and I'm really excited about that. So as a preview, I won't go in too deep into this because it gets messy, but essentially I did a real assessment of what we kind of are looking like at our growth trajectory. And I feel like our COP really we have our national visibility. We are a credible source where people are listening to us. Maybe they're not inviting us to every table that we need to be at yet, but those are things that can evolve as we move forward in this. So I put this out there. It's going to be in the slide deck, but it's kind of where my brain and what we're talking about at some of the leadership levels of what does life look like as we continue to grow or get into different communities. So I think that's an exciting one. But for the resources, I wanted to highlight some of the 5 ways you're really seeing our COP's impact. And those can be defined. So the monthly webinars, this has been a tried and true staple of ours. We have never missed a month. Pretty proud of that fact, but they've been increasing in activity. We've had different topics. I think it's been a great series, and I'm really proud of what we've done in that space. We have workshops, resource sharing, advocacy, and another major part of what we do is our role within the meta community of communities. So there is enough communities over there talking about different things. We are bridges between them. We are the glue. And I think that's really important to show how that has started to show off in this space. Monthly webinars, yep, you've probably figured that out. So over 2025, we did major topics like SOC 2 compliance, lots of NIST 800, 171, as well as CMMC type of components, but we also did sustainable documentation, endpoints, sponsorship and governance, research security offices. We're talking about all the things that you probably are talking about or curious about in your world. The resource document that we've been posting for the references. All the links are there as well as on our websites. This one's a little beefier of a slide, but this is a huge amount of history and some phenomenal resources you may or may not know about. And life began when we started talking to each other in 2020, where we all started looking for peers and what was happening around us. And so we were realizing we were all creating similar things on our own, and no one really knew what they were doing was would this hold weight somewhere else? So this became a way to find out what it took to build our regulated research programs. And we developed 6 pillars of our research programs. This is a fantastic document. I've read it many, many, many times in different mindsets, and it hits home in different ways. So we were looking at that, looking at ways of bringing this together. But every year that we've been doing workshops, they are very much custom designed to meet whatever the current institutional needs are. I mean, like, that is what drives RCOP entirely, is what is the community currently asking for? We are not big into the rinse and repeat. If you would like our history and those resources are things you need now, by all means, that's why they're recorded. That's why future you will go, oh, that's perfect that you talked about that 2 years ago. I need it now. So then the next one we did was the system security plan. And the need that we were filling there was we were realizing that people were writing this amazing SSP, but they were also about to get graded on something that they had never seen someone else's. And so this is a really important document to not know if you're kind of doing it right, given enough information or not. And so what we did in one day was we gathered the community and we wrote mock responses to 43 of the 110 controls. And while this doesn't mean that what we wrote was perfect, send it away, ship it, and it can be assessed as something formal and legit, but what it did do was ground your thought process in here is how your peer institutions are looking at these same challenges, and here's what they would write about that same control. The next big one that we did was a day with the CMMC assessors, and that was to build continuously on some of these items that we had been working through. And it was truly looking at, so how did we do with that SSP, as well as what does it look like to vet an assessor? What does it look like to have them on site looking at your stuff? Third-party assessments are brand new to us, and it was a little intimidating of, are we doing enough? So each of those we've produced workshop reports. This is all publicly available, again, on that resource page. And then our most recent one was sustainable documentation. And that was realizing that compliance does not end the moment yay, we crossed the finish line, we got CMMC level 2. It turns out that's just a continuation on, but many of us have spent so much time and effort and love into that curation of that SSP. But this workshop really started looking at the community of what's out there that we're doing well and what can we all learn from each other on. I mean, maybe we don't all have it all figured out, but if parts of us have some parts of it figured out, this is why the community really works well with each other. I wanted to highlight a few that probably have come and gone through the website that you may or may not even know exist. So we typically publish all of the polls from these webinars, and this is a really great way of kind of seeing where you align with some of your peers. So, hey, do you have a research security office? No. Oh, I didn't know that 50% of us do. I didn't realize that. Something like that. So those are all available. We also pull together a lot of the federal resources. So, hey, what's an actual .gov document for this type of resource? And instead of knowing which source is a valid one versus we're trying to bring these together. We also bring together a lot of the higher ed stuff. So if you're sharing content in any venue, again, RCOP is essentially glue to all of these communities. So I am happy to share, promote, and highlight all of the ways that we are making our impact known across the various venues. We also have some interesting use cases where the goal there was to start centralizing our messaging around what can we tell people about, I don't know, our governance structures, or what does it look like? What does lab equipment actually mean to an assessor? Okay, so let's describe it from higher ed terms versus the assessor terms. Okay. And another great one is Purdue University had a end-to-end CUI workflow award, and part of their toolkit was completely released to RCOP as I hope others can get value out of this. This was part of their dissemination, and this is where all of the long-term content for their award lives. A big one that we've recently been able to get deeper into, and that's a lot of with our partnerships, has been speaking out on behalf of our needs, our use cases, and what life really looks like from our situation. And two prime examples. So CASC just recently produced NIST 800-171 research computing and data centers. So it was, how is this impacting our research computing centers around the country? Okay. And then a big one that Eric's been involved in is this HPC security overlay. And that is very specific examples of here are the controls, as well as here are ways that we're able to meet that same security expectation, but maybe it's a little bit, okay, here's that overlay of what would actually work for this space. Because yes, we are a bit different, but we are not totally different. So it's not like we're crossing these things off saying, no, we can't do it. It's saying, what about this type of format? Would this work? Here is what I totally geeked out on this weekend, and I'm willing to admit that I am probably the one who's most excited about it. But for ages now, should I know about this conference? Should I know about this federal briefing that has an open comment window? Should I know about, hey, here's a webinar going on in a similar space? Okay, great. Like all of these things are happening in each of their separate communities. And what the research security.org. So this is the new startup award that just began in October. But one of the ways that this is going to really make an impact is let's talk about the whole research security landscape. Let's look at what's actually happening out there. And maybe, you know what, if you didn't know that these things were going on and it's of interest, yeah, time to join up. So instead of here's a registration link, these are like, this would link to the conference webpage. And you know what? I don't have to maintain Zoom links, registration times, but I do know the dates. So it's really exciting. I hope you check it out. That's also in the resource guide. And then the other one that is just getting started, and this will be the first real launch of it. I did a soft launch of it last month, but we're starting to do kind of a monthly report of what's happening within the research security and the research security, cybersecurity spaces. And this will be where we are able to highlight the tremendous victories of like Secure Center. What are they up to right now? What is EDUCAUSE writing about right now that should impact us? What are associated conferences? Trusted CI, what have they produced recently that like we all should have actually known about and gone, oh, thank you so much, but I didn't even know that that existed. So it's probably the Slack community 10 times filtered over where this is how we all work together. And to me, this is a really important part of how RCOP is a very central portion of this very broad and dynamic community where we get to be this glue in between all of these different venues as well as roles. And I think that's just such an important role that we play in this community. So when I also mentioned Slack, I don't have that as a formal resource, but by all means, if you have not joined our Slack site, it's Higher Ed CUI, and we are really chatty, but we are really, really helpful to the community. And this is what we can do as the community. Um, oh yeah, I had this still. So then, since we are talking about this is the ways you've seen our impact, this is exactly how you have seen our impact. And as I said, we've never missed a beat with our webinars. We've had 48 right now. They're increasing in attendance. So last year we had 4 of them that were the most viewed ones ever. We also have 11,000 hours of community attendance. That's huge, just at the webinars. You'll see the Slack numbers. I mean, the increase from that, when I wrote the proposal, we had 340 members in the Slack community when it was proposed, and we're now looking around, I think 14 or 1500. Same applies with the participating institutions. So we had 130 when we proposed, and we're now sitting around 380. So I wanted to share these because this is really what we're all so part of, such a big part of. Need one more, apparently. And here's the final, hey, this is ways you can get involved. But let me make sure that we had room for any more questions, especially since we did have to chop off Ask the Assessor quick, or were there any for me? And so with that, I will stop sharing and open it up for April. Were there questions?
Yep, I think there was one question that we didn't get to in the document, and it was around the CVE remediation timeline. So the question is, what is your professional approach or guidance related to the CVE remediation timeline, violation, and CIS/STIG configuration compliance adherence? They're trying to get a sense for the difference in threshold for assessment failure versus assessment pass in a mere 3PAO versus C3PAO engagement.
Sorry, I'm on mute. I think there are the universal standard that I typically see is criticals within a month, then your medium highs are like next 60, next 90. But I also think it's really dependent on your organization and what your risk acceptance also looks like. Not all patches realistically could be remediated within 30 days, and some remediation isn't even worth it. It doesn't, the cost of remediating doesn't outweigh there's a lot of analysis to it. So I would say I'm happy to provide different guidance based off of different regulations, or like PCI can be different than high trust, and there's a lot of guidance out there, but I would really hone in on your internal procedures as well, like what matters to the business and what makes sense from a risk perspective within your environment.
I mean, I guess I'll ask to the community, but is the calendar something you've ever wished for or wondered where does something like that exist? Thanks. Yeah, that feels good to see. Um, well, if that's it, not going to keep you for 3 more minutes, but honestly, thank you all. I very much appreciate everyone's role in how we've made this community what it is.
Yes, thank you, everybody.
And with that, we